Earlier, I was discussing just how bad the strategy of constantly repeating mistruth is both insulting and deceitful for everyday Australians, and certainly confusing for parents everywhere, including those living in my electorate of Gilmore. I talked about the bubble of politics, the argy-bargy of debate that can be easily dissected into truth and false facts, or fake news, as some of my colleagues refer to. However, many parts of the media are not as savvy, and clearly from some of the debate today, some of those on the opposition, every member of the opposition over there is actually repeating the same fairy story. There was no funding for the 5th and 6th years of their proposed education funding. I believe this is a pretty shameful way to behave. Labor's 2013 election commitment for education was unfunded then, and it remains so despite some Labor candidates stating that every dollar will be replaced. I would ask, show me the money. Where's it coming from? No member of the shadow Labor ministry has confirmed that this information is in fact truth. I wonder, does the shadow treasurer know that the Labor team has been committed for $22 billion? I'd imagine not. It will leave a massive unfunded commitment. Education funding is calculated using a really complicated model that has a reference to a base amount per student plus loadings. Those loadings are put there to target schools and students of disadvantage, including those from lower socioeconomic areas, those students with disabilities, and those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, and also students with low English proficiency. There's also a consideration of school size and location. And in my case, the New South Wales government has a different methodology for which I cannot account. Commonwealth funding to government schools in New South Wales has been growing faster than the state funding. Under the coalition government from 2014 to 2017, total funding to government schools in New South Wales has been $7.2 billion, an increase of 43.7%, and the second largest increase across government schools in Australia. The future increase from 2015 to 2016 through 2020 will be an additional $563 million. Our funding growth means there is no reason schools cannot continue to support the teachers with their new or existing initiatives such as specialist teachers or intervention programs. Buildings, playground equipment and yard maintenance for government schools is actually the responsibility of the state government. Overall, the coalition government is growing investment in schools from $16 billion to $20.1 billion, on top of more than $14 billion the coalition has been delivering for regional and remote schools. There have not been, nor will there be, any cuts to education funding in Gilmore. However, there is a great deal more to education than having well-maintained buildings and increased funding. It's the quality of our teachers and their efforts in every way to help each and every child reach their individual potential. I know that the majority of our teachers love their work. They love the children they teach. I acknowledge that. I have seen their work in action and the results they achieve. The budget has committed future real funding for education, giving certainty. This is much preferred by parents and teachers rather than some dreamlike nebulous amount that to this minute remains unfunded like an empty piggy bank. I question the reasons behind the Labor Party in denying initiatives of truly delivering a needs-based funding model. Why will they vote to see government schools receive at most 4.7 legislative funding growth compared to the Coalition's plan for 5.1 annual increase? Why will they vote for schools of identical need to receive different levels of funding for their schooling resource standard just because they live in a different state? Why, after using the name of Gonski as a call to arms for teachers' unions around the country, why is Labor now going against David Gonski's endorsement of the Coalition's plan? Why do they prefer different funding methodologies that advantage some non-government schools over others? And if they want to continue the 27 special deals that they implemented, they will see needy students in one state get up to $15,000 less than the same student in the same school but in a different state. Labor is trying to have an argument about funding, but the legislation before Parliament is about delivering a real needs-based model to distribute that funding. Spending is not a substitute for reform. It is remarkable that after years of posturing on the Gonski, The Leader of the Opposition now stands opposed to the Turnbull government's consistent implementation of needs-based funding model. So I began with a reference to the Schools Resource Standard, which is the central focus of the Gonski reforms. From 2018, new arrangements for Commonwealth schools funding will be focused on needs with a schooling resource standard, as recommended by that review in 2011. The resource standard for each school will depend on the size and composition of their student population, the number of students who need extra help with having a disability, those who come from a disadvantage from home who may never have read a book back at home, Indigenous students, the school size and the location. A call on Labor to stop this ridiculous rubbish, treating Australians as if they are gullible sponges to absorb constant repetition of untruthful statements so that eventually they'll believe them to be true. Mums, dads, grandparents and families just want to know that the current programs running in their children's schools will continue. Without increases, these programs will continue. So let's just examine some real case scenarios of funding for the students in Gilmore. If a student is attending Shoalhaven High School this year, the federal government is contributing $3,708 to that child. Next year it will be $3,896. For a student at Narra East Public School, the school in my electorate that is now known throughout the country, not necessarily for the terrific job they do, this year they receive $3,528 for each student, and next year they will receive $3,707. At Vincentia High School, each student is allocated $3,380. Next year it will be $3,551. And finally, for an example, Moruya High School, a student is allocated $3,419 this year, and next year it will be $3,592. Every single school in Gilmore gets an increase in education investment from the Commonwealth Government. The figures are averaged out per student, but in the end, it's a number gained by adding to the base according to the needs. And eventually, the school principal, working with his or her staff and parents, chooses how best to utilise money allocated to their school in the best interests of their enrolled students. The teachers and principals just want to know that the time they've spent developing new programs or having the training opportunities to grow in their professional development and deliver great programs for our children, they just want to know that this will continue. They want certainty in relation to this. With our investment in education, all of the above will happen. Contrast this certainty of funding to imaginary dollar figures that are unfunded, and has been quoted that sometimes, somewhere, we'll get it from revenue. Oh, does that include borrowing from overseas? Well, whatever it takes. This is not appropriate for Australia. We need to spend within our revenue sources, particularly for education. As a parent and a past teacher, I know that certainty wins absolutely over fake promises. The teachers in my region, in schools like Sanctuary Point Public, Narra East Public, Narra, Bomaderry, going down to Ulladulla and Milton, going further down to Batemans Bay and Sunshine Public, they are amazing. They have done fabulous things with our children, and they just need to know that the money they're getting next year will be more than the money they're getting now. They need to know that the money they're getting over the next 10 years is going to be more than CPI, so the principals can actually develop programs like the robotics at Sanctuary Point, like the video classes, like some of the other things that they're doing with STEM. They are doing amazing things, and yet there are children in those schools who have literacy problems, so they're bringing in helpers with literacy. Each and every one of those programs will continue, and each and every one of those parents needs to be reassured that each and every one of those programs will continue. I am tired of the opposition scaring my parents and my custodial grandparents that their children will miss out by telling mistruths to the public, which is then regurgitated in the media. It is wrong, it is inappropriate, and stop doing it. Our parents and our children deserve so much more respect than you are showing them. Our teachers deserve more respect. You are degrading the work that they have done, and you're pretending that you have got a funding bucket that will actually commit to what you're promising. You don't. You never did. You still don't. And I'm absolutely ashamed of some of the tactics that you're using.